Salutations, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Factions of Freedom. I am your host, Freedom Faction, and I have titled this one Implementing the Technocracy. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things, specifically things like Agenda 2030, what I would consider the socio-economic reformation, and all kinds of other things that are going on that illustrate the change that we're undergoing, this shift. I'm going to try to stick to as many different facts as I can to try to illustrate, like I said, the point that we are living in very, 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 very tumultuous times, very, very sci-fi times. This is the future. The future is now. You can see evidence of it all around us. With the technology, with the things that we're able to do. Look at how many different things have changed in just a short period of time, in 5 minutes of time, or even 5 years worth of time. All day, I've been spending time making dream catchers, CD covers, phone covers, bracelets, all kinds of random different things. And this is what I'm able to do in one time, in one day. So I got a lot I want to cover with you guys. Without ranting, I got a lot I want to cover with you guys. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. I want to start off by saying that there's over 94 million people outside of the labor workforce who are not employed. What do you think that means? That rivals, if you think about it, it really does rival the Great Depression or the recession. That's basically what we're in. The idea is they want to try to demoralize us. The fact that there's so many different, that there is so many different people, that there is what we would consider a population control issue. But this is the idea of devaluing humans at the same time. It's part of that whole depopulation, dehumanization campaign, making us seem like we are the issues. But these people are villains. The ones that we're calling the elite. These ones that we call the technocrats. That's what I would call them. Bill Gates. Oh, Bill Gates. George Soros. David Rockefeller. Jacob Rothschild. These villains. These technocrats. That's what I would call them. They're trying to make it seem like we're the problem here on the earth when clearly we could do something about it. And clearly we are doing something about it. And if anything, before I actually jump into all of our present day nonsense, I'd like to address the idea that, or the date, it's the 15th anniversary of 9/11. 15 years later, or 15 years of lies later. So I'm going to point this out real quick before I go into, like I said, all of the present day issues that we're dealing with. I had someone ask me, what am I doing in remembrance or in honor of all those who died on 9/11? Okay, I'm not like Roswell. Okay, that's beating a dead horse. We got to understand, because we already understand that Osama bin Laden is ex-CIA. That's like beating a dead horse. We have other issues to look at. We could break that down in so many different ways. Right there, jet fuel can't melt steel beams. And I'm sure people are wondering, well, what is fact number one? Fact number one is that taxation is theft. Okay, so to get back to the point, how has 9/11 affected you? I want you guys to email me that if you check this video out. Really, because outside of remembering that over 3,000 or 38,000 different people died We need to understand that their deaths were not in vain. We need to understand what's going on in our present day. Okay, the fact that things are running rampant, that's because, if anything, 9/11 15 years ago was a massive occult ritual, if you want to look at it. Here we are, like I said, 15 years later, Anna Lucia's 2016, the year of light, the year of Lucifer, you see. So how has 9/11 affected you? It's definitely made me do something about it. I'm pretty sure that's why we're here at this point. And I'm not here to bash anyone. I'm here to obviously educate and do as much good as I can after knowing what 9/11 is in so many different realms, you see. It's because of that it's spawned off different things, such as my own program, such as Lori's with the Underground Resistance Network, such as exposing satanic world government. You know, Truth Talk News, all kinds of different branches of alternative news media. The Sentinels of Truth, all kinds of different things, you see. And people coming out and exposing the injustices that are going on. And that's why we have a lot of the different information that we do have, because of the shift and the things that have occurred. So 15 years later, how do I do them respect? Well, you know, 15 years later, I'm not a child, or actually I still am to some degree, but I can actually do something with the time that I do have. So that's how I try to honor them, those that have fallen, because we do remember and we won't forget. So to jump into, like I said, what's going on present day in 2016, or to, if anything, here let's jump back again one more year, back in 2015, whenever they had Bilderberg, they wanted to implement the AI grid, the artificial intelligence grid, right? That was also the time period that we had Jade Helm 15, right? And then this year we had kind of a capstone style program, the UX 16, the unconventional warfare exercise of 2016. So Anthony Patches talked about this, and I've tried to break this down, you know, in so many different ways. But what Jade Helm was a quantum computing software, basically where they were trying to digitize the entire world, or at least digitize Northern America with quantum computers, with world scaling technology. I mean, they have drones that are able to scan, you know, the surface of everything. And then you have vehicles that are able to patrol and surveil things as well. I mean, how are we able to realize that Pokemon Go is a CIA surveillance program, but we're not able to understand that the military has sonar style software that picks up, you know, basically geographic locations and geographic information, you see. So Anthony Patch talked about this as well, how Jade Helm 15 and UX 16 were I guess, human-based programs of quantifying the world, categorizing and emulating our reality. And the whole idea behind that is that and I talk about this in so many different ways, is we are living in an American experiment. Not the experience. We're past the American dream, if you want to talk about it in that sense. And the only way, you know, if you believe in the American dream, is if you got to be asleep to believe that, you know, because you would not be seeing all these things and still believing that America is the great that it should be, you see. So we have moved on past that, past the dream, to the American experiment, and that's what's going on in so many different fashions. Like I said, like I started off with, 94 million people are not in work. The labor force is at 62%. thankfully, because of the things of like technology, we're able to, with the advent of technology, we're able to change how people are able to get information, revenue, finances, this, that, and the third. So labor is only one particular facet of what could be considered, revenue for the country or for the government that's taxable, so to speak. But basically what that's doing, when they're doing all that, and that's why I said only a part of it is labor, is what they're doing is trying to eliminate the need for man, or restricting the capabilities or the things that man can do, right? Making man obsolete. And that's because technology is what's going to start governing us. And that's what we're starting to see, is how our very tools, things like IBM Watson, computers used by the Nazis back in World War II, we're going to see things like that now governing the haves and the have-nots. And I'm going to try to explain that kind of concept on how, like I said, they're categorizing reality, how they're trying to emulate it and simulate it in so many different ways. I mean, there's too much of a population in their eyes, in these people like George Soros's eyes. There's too many people on the planet, so they feel like they need to start killing us off. And this is why we see, things like the rise of the police state, wars for days, disease running rampant, all kinds of different, bio bugs, super drug resistant bugs, running rampant. Zika, exactly, Ebola. They're affecting third world countries first, and then, it's a unilateral assault, basically. So there's already too many people in their eyes, and you can see this at the Georgia Guidestones, where they talk about wanting to have the population down to a comfortable, I don't even know the number, but a comfortable population, one that they can control. And what they're doing, it basically is eugenics, it's population control. And I'm sure you're wondering, how does this all tie into technology? Well, I'll get to that. I really will. I kind of have to build up to it to explain the pretense of why we're going to accept it, and how it's also going to seem natural, as well as it already being here, you see. So, places like Chicago, Denver, California, they have already had technocratic things installed into their country, into their state, here in America. But because everything has to kind of work in synergy, we also have to look at places like Venezuela and France. And I'm constantly going back and forth in between these places because they're hallmarks of what's going on. Japan as well, and China. Really, we have to look at the world. We have to understand what's really going on to understand what phase of the plan they are at, what phase of the agenda they're at. Like right there, Homeland Security plans to monitor your social media account. I mean, yeah, clearly they were already doing that, but now we have them coming out making public declarations. Exactly. Today's tech oligarchs are worse than the bank robbers. And that's what I could not illustrate enough, that I wish I could drive that point home. Places, things like Uber, Facebook, Google, Netflix, and Amazon, they are the mafia now. They are the digital mafia. Let me write that down. The digital mafia. Yeah, because when you think about it, these are the people that have all of the information of the world. Even George Soros uses Facebook, so does Pope Francis, and Bill Gates. I mean, they themselves may not, but they have entities and corporations that do use Facebook, so they are absorbed somewhat to a degree into the digital mafia. You see. And that's what's going on. That is the technocracy. So to kind of bring it home, to explain kind of what I was talking about, because like I said, Google has all of your information. It is already a self-aware, artificially intelligent search engine to a degree. That's only one facet that it has to do. I mean, look at the information that they have. Google's parent company, Alphabet, has already talked about building things such as a solar city or a smart city, which is as well along the lines of Obama's Smart Grids and Smart Cities initiative back in 2009, right? All of the different things that we're talking about here, this is the future that is existing now. The goal that they're pushing for is the 2030 region. I've tried to tell you guys this in so many different ways, and that's why we're seeing so much chaos, is because from the ashes of the old world order, the new world order will rise. And that's what it is. The digital mafia, that's the beginning, that's the seed. They have to have a foundation to build it on, and we will eventually move into the matrix provided by people like Facebook, virtual reality provided by Samsung or Amazon. You see. So whenever we look at things, like I said, like Venezuela, the Caracas protest, where they had millions of people, just flooding like an entire main street. That's what we have. That will cause a reaction. That will get attention, unfortunately, because Venezuela is a collapsing society, and it's a victim of engineering, of social engineering, and population control. They now have the military handing out food. Things like fingerprints for food. I talked about that as well, and I thought that was kind of radical. I can understand them breaking into a zoo. That's ridiculous. If people aren't working, burgers cost over $150. You wouldn't even have enough to pay your employees. What that is hyperinflationary. It's a hyperinflationary collapse. I forget what it's called. I don't have it right here. But what it basically is like whenever everything shoots up in price, so you have nothing to kind of balance it with. To kind of it's crazy, Then they have people confiscating their guns, which means that only like crooked people get guns, and I get that, black market people who don't want to run by the government because they already see what's happening to the government. These are people who are probably stocked up as well, So it's literally like the people against the government, the people that they're protesting. They want food, but because there's nothing there, we're seeing what's happening. So if you don't think they're going to use that as an excuse to formally do what they did in Syria, you see, with George Soros's Open Society Foundation, where everyone's going to be inheriting a whole bunch of Venezuelans, right? Who could possibly be infected with Zika. I mean, Brazil is right there. I'm just saying, but that's what's gonna that's what I foresee. I'm not calling any dates or anything like that. I'm just saying that's a possibility, because they're trying to use mass migration, things like Syria, like the Syrian refugee crisis. They're trying to use that as the perfect tool for Agenda 2030. For being able to kind of get everybody on a global standard. And that's kind of what they want to do. They want to break down the idea of state powers, of local powers, and get everything federalized, you see, to where they get their information and their power from places like the UN, from the Trilateral Commission, from all kinds of different, you know, globalist organizations that fund this type of chaos. What they're trying to do is have like international destabilization, global chaos, global financial chaos, and global financial collapses, to change things into a one world religion, a one world currency, you know, the idea that, you know, we can barter and trade only on their system. And that's what I said earlier, you know, like I said, with labor, people being in the labor workforce, only 64% of that, you know, that's only counting people who are doing physical labor, not people who are doing, you know, labor on top of computers, you know, on top of social media, you know, people labor that can't be accounted for, and all kinds of other things like that, you see. So a whole lot of different things are changing in this world. So how does that tie into Venezuela? Well, they've already collapsed. So their next step will be in the globalist agenda. Whatever happens to Venezuela will be used on the remaining part of the population. Whatever is not reformed in Venezuela will be used in the rest of the world. So to bring it back home, because I definitely kind of went off on a side rant there. To bring it back home, the American experiment, right? Things like Chicago, Georgia, Denver, Florida, California, to illustrate to you guys the technocracy that we're feeling. Right there is two perfect examples: the doctors prescribing virtual reality games for pain relief, and Pope Francis saying that global warming is a sin. I'll use both of those. You know, that's perfect. It's emblematic of what's going on. Chicago has implemented two things: your citizen threat score ranking, you know, seeing how much of a threat you are to society. Maybe you're a public enemy, I don't know. And pre-crime technology, or real crime tracking, or real-time crime tracking technology. Pre-crime technology, basically. Using things like your threat score to basically generate how deadly you are, how much of a harm, as I said, you are to society. That's in Chicago. And I think they had their bloodiest year, or their bloodiest month in August, in 20 years, just the other week. And that's what's crazy, is because, you know, call it the psychotronic warfare, call it the overfluoridated water, call it the chemicals in the air, you know, call it the economic squeeze, call it what you want. People are getting angry. And they have right to be angry. Right there, calls for Angela Merkel to step down, a huge demonstration across Germany, and that's August 1st. Millions of South Carolina bees die after anti-Zika spraying. They're weaponizing even the air. Okay, to get to point, you know, with Denver, okay, they went door to door asking people about their personal information, building some kind of registry. They even did that in Georgia with votes, and these are cops that are doing this, right? They did that in Florida to see as well, you know, going door to door, checking people's urine samples to see who had possibly been infected by Zika. Right there, health officials warned Louisiana flooding could help spread Zika. So what does all this chaos mean? Right? Why am I prefacing it all of this way? It's because of people like the digital mafia, right? Where they'll have control over this type of chaos, over what's being seen. If they were doing their job, I wouldn't have to be doing what it is I'm doing. These problems wouldn't be persisting. I wouldn't have to look at them so intricately, you see. But it is because I see some type of job being done by a group of individuals in a certain fashion that I feel like I need to do my job in looking at things in a different variety, or in a different variable, you see. So what I'm basically saying is they're not doing the job. How does this all tie in together? What they're doing with this chaos is they're using it, ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos. They're using it to seize power, like in Turkey with Erdogan, where he seized power. He had that random military coup, and then didn't he end up killing children? What kind of person that wants power ends up killing children? A sick freak, I'll tell you that much. Or Pope Francis Franklin Pope. Probably Franklin Pope. What this is mental oppression, mental exhaustion. They're really, as I keep saying, they're externalizing their hierarchy. They're on to the next phase. This is the new world order. You know, any kind of evidence that you need is here. The Trilateral Commission, you know, the CFR, Bilderberg, you know, they're not hiding it anymore. The UN, they're not hiding anything anymore. Everything's coming out, what they're doing, their agendas, you know, shutting down coal plants, shutting down all kinds of different businesses, making it harder for people to actually build businesses, messing with the trade, you know, messing with all kinds of different things that basically would help people like myself get income. I mean, they suppress posts. It's crazy. And that's why I don't ever pay for any of that promotion nonsense. Because, you know, organically, if my stuff's going to get out there, my stuff's going to get out there. I don't want them saying, oh, well, look at this guy. He pays for his followers. No, I pay for my followers in hard work and dedication. Year 2, you know. But to get back to point, okay, because we're really, as always, getting sidetracked. So, like I said, what the whole door-to-door police thing makes me think of whenever that happens here in America, like I said, ironically enough, this is akin to what happened in Brazil, with the Brazil going door-to-door, handing out leaflets, telling people, you know, hey, don't get pregnant, you might be infected with Zika, hey, don't do this, you might be infected with Zika, oh, hey, don't go on to this, you might be infected with Zika. They fumigated streets because they thought of Zika. And all of these different things are happening because of Zika, their first global crisis, right? Right there, Florida governor has financial ties to Zika mosquito company. Pesticides sprayed to fight Zika may be more harmful than Zika. What they're doing with this weaponized disease, this Rothschild Rockefeller Foundation disease that Bill Gates weaponized, you see, what they're doing with this is basically breaking down barriers. This is climate change to a whole another degree, and I talked about this in another episode with Lori and Robbie D from across the sea. You know, what this basically is them turning up, pun intended, the temperature, them raising the climate. Things are clearly crazy for a reason. As George Soros says, he wants an open society, and Al Gore, him and his whole thing on global warming, and John Kerry saying prepare for a borderless world. As I said before, with the Syrian refugee crisis and what they'll eventually subsequently do with the Venezuela issue, is let all of these refugees, let all of these people come and basically break down your idea of nationality. And it's nation states, you know, places, you know, local places that will have to pay for this type of globalization act. Why do I say this is implementation of the technocracy? Because right there, big brother of smarter plant and smarter cities. This is what they want. They want to be able to have everything on a grid. Right there, smarter meters and smart grid, smarter energy. Well, you can check that out at the Event Chronicle. Okay, and this is an article from July 6th. They want to have everything on a grid, on a quantifiable basis. and I heard you guys go check that out, where Ray Kurzweil is talking about the future and how it offers meaningful work, not meaningless jobs. And this is what I constantly talk about as far as figuring out what it means to be human. There's so many different things that, like I said, they're trying to throw at us these days. Smart meters on your electric box, right there. Tesla merging with Solar City and how it announces a plan to build solar roofs. Like I said before, Google's parent company, Alphabet, how they're trying to build a smart city, so to speak. And all these things are happening because, in their eyes, they see this as an opportunity, a way to get everybody on global governance. I mean, not everyone may have a house, but everyone does have a phone these days. You see, or some kind of way to get it onto the network, onto the internet. And that's why on October 1st, Obama is handing off authority of the internet, you see, to the UN, to the Agenda 2030 standards. So to show you guys, kind of the information of what I'm talking about is the technocracy, the technological continental design. And this is just a refurbished version of the 1934 version of the technocracy. Right. What we're going to be looking at here are some of the proponents of technocracy and what I keep trying to tell you guys. I finally just decided to go out and get a video where we illustrate things like this. Some of the language that we're going to be looking at, some of the things that we're going to be talking about is from 1934. And these are people, these are clearly people that are older than myself or dead. And this comes from the eco movement. This comes from what I'm always talking about, where we're going to be giving people, these climate change activists, different power. Because right now, with the overpopulation, crisis, the migrant crisis, the refugee crisis, however they want to put it, immigration invasion, what I would want to call it. Like I said, George Soros providing the problem with his Open Society Foundation, spreading everything across the entire world, you see. And I've even talked about it as well, the ISIS plague, the fact that they're able to use even ISIS, or that ISIS, we already know it being created, using ISIS to the nth degree for being an agenda advancer. Oh no, looks like ISIS is there. Looks like they're going to attack, this place. These people have to give up their rights. That's the formula. We already know this. The same way they're going to use these climate change activists. You see, so kind of keep that in your mind. And like I said, these are from 1934. Okay, these thoughts. And the man that you see right there is Mr. M. King Hubbard. And this is from the eco movement of 1934. And I'm going to read from some of it. Technocracy is dealing with the social phenomena in the widest sense of the word. This includes not only actions of human beings, but also everything that directly or indirectly affects their actions. Consequently, the studies of technocracy embraces practically the whole field of science and industry, biology, climate, natural resources, industrial equipment, and all of that enters into the social picture. No one can expect to have any understanding of our present social problems without having at least a panoramic view of the basic relations of these essential elements of the picture. All things of the earth are compromised to matter, and therefore required a knowledge of chemistry. These things move, and in so doing, involve energy. An understanding of these relationships require the knowledge of physics, industrial equipment, as well as the substances of which living organisms are compromised, is derived from the earth. This requires knowledge of geology and earth processes, human and organisms, and derive their food from other organisms, hence a knowledge of biology is necessary. Okay, so right here, more importantly, is where I wanted to get into. The important thing is to get a comprehensive view of the problem as a whole rather than of its parts as unrelated scraps of knowledge, right? They want to, because everything is going to be so diverse, they don't want most people to be able to break it down. And this is why at different angles, I say this is an action toward the agenda, or this is an action towards the agenda. This is them trying to make a move towards that larger goal. With Oregon, now they're already having what is it? Tracking by the mile. They have a black box in cars where it's tracking you by the mile, and eventually, I'm sure they'll implement autonomous vehicles too that do that as well, and they'll send you a monthly stipend where they see how much you've actually traveled. And in Washington, they've also got a carbon tax. They see how much you've used that way. So I tell you guys all of these different things to have you look into these alternative different types of energy sources. Attachments onto your sink that either purify or even mystify your water to where you use 2% of it. There's all kinds of different ways that you can combat this, you see. So I'm trying to show you guys a chapter 4 basically, the nature of the human animal. We have to deal with the fundamentals of scientific basis of the phenomena that make up our complex social activities. We have discussed that the animal that we may summarize as follows: analysis of the existing social habits compromising our price system mode of control. We have no physical barriers, aside from human apathy, to the attainment onto this continent of an average physical standard of living that would be the highest we have ever known. We have shown likewise that our social activities, as controlled by existing social habits that we term, quote, the rules of the game of the price system, are rapidly forcing us to an impasse, due to the fact that these habits were largely acquired during a stage of relatively primitive technological development that was characterized by low energy rates of operation, scarcity in general, in the presence of the technological mechanism that has evolved into a high energy operation with, for the first time in human history, the potentialities of plenty. The price system rules of enforced scarcity are found to be no longer adequate. If you want the truth, if you want the truth, basically what they're saying is, because there's so many of us, we need to watch what it is we put out. High energy operation. Basically being aware of, as I said before, your consumption and your production. So I'm sure you're wondering, why are we reading from the actual documents? Well, it's to kind of get it on record. To understand, really. We're also talking about basically ideas that have been rooted and that are now starting to come into pass. Right here. Man hours per production and the total industrial employment in man hours versus the physical production. We've cut back. We really have. So while we have this chart here, I would like to talk about some of the requirements as written by M. King Hubbard. One of them is to register on a continuous 24-hour basis the total net conversion of energy. Two, by means of the registration of energy converted and consumed, make possible a balanced load. As you see here, they're able to market, or they're able to put on a graph how much work we did prior to our decline, prior to present times. Now, like nowadays, like I said before, we don't really do that much work. As I let in with 94 million people are out of jobs. That's 64% of the workforce that's being used. But that's because we don't really do a lot of labor. As I said before, the things that we have, the technology that we have, is provided a whole new life and a whole new reality. You see. So now, with that, what strands are we putting onto the system? And that's eventually what they will start asking. 2, by means of the registration of the energy converted and I already said that, huh? Sorry guys, I get you. There's so much note, there's so much. All right. 3, provide a continuous inventory of all production and consumption. So to break that down, when you use a computer, when you use any kind of technological device, anything that is basically attached to the grid, attached to the matrix, right? It creates either an inode or a piece into the log file. It's tracked. And that's what a lot of people say mostly the dark web is it is this information basically just unaccessed. I mean, it has to go somewhere, but there's only so many different places that can go. There are people that search for the most minute of things. This is why I say things like the digital mafia. They have all of your information. That'll stop you from getting any job. You see, depending on what they'll have to say about you, what you'll actually be able to do. And that's why they're a step ahead of a lot of different things, you see, and that's what it is. But being able to provide a continuous inventory, there's tracking, there's metadata, there's actual data, there's so many different ways that people, like the NSA, like the CIA, the FBI, and all these different organizations, how they track what exactly you do, where you're going, this, that, and the third. And that's what happens. So this is why I said, like I said, we're implementing the technocracy. And the reason we're talking about this now in such depth is because in 2015, like I said, with Bilderberg, they said they were going to implement the AI grid, and that's what's happening now. But the way they're implementing this, I mean, I couldn't talk about this. The way they're having to implement this is because we're so worried about security because of this immigration. You see, this migration, or this immigrant invasion. You see, it's because it's causing, the culture clash, the clash of civilizations. So much destabilization, so much cultural change, because it's causing all these different things. That's why they're able to implement it. People are worried about their safety. Right there, DHS's new Orwellian pre-crime tech promises facial recognition software can tell if you're a terrorist. And China is building cruise missiles powered by a killer artificial intelligence. Wow. And the DHS is eyeing security takeover of state elections, and this is like I said, what's happening, because they have to keep a continuous log of this information. This is why things are always constantly happening, like the music cutting out. No, those are always technical issues. 4, provide a specific registration of the type, kind, etc. of all goods and services, where produced and where used. Like I said, when you use your card, whenever you use your Apple Pay, and call it Mark of the Beast technology, call it one world currency, call it e-currency, call it whatever you want. That's exactly what it is. Whenever you do anything these days, even pull out your money, it's tracked. Everything is tracked. Your food, what's purchased, what's used, where you go, things like that. Elon Musk's master plan for Tesla is all about energy, new cars, autonomous, and sharing. Yeah, sharing information. They want to have everything out there to where, everything's open and free in George Soros's eye. The open and free society. 5. Provide a specific registration of the consumption of each individual, plus a record and description of the individual. Well, if you just go to your Facebook and see what you've liked recently, because I'm sure, on the back end of Facebook, they can see what it is that you do like, when you liked it, and how many other people have liked it as well. So, yeah. And that's where we are. That is what I would consider the digital mafia. But this, what I was reading from, was from the eco movement of M. King Hubbard. These were words that were written in 1934. Words that have a meaning now, or that are being used now. So I've already talked about how, Anthony Patch, the infamous man that's able to interpret on what's going on at CERN, God knows if we did not have him, we would not understand half of the things that are going on. But I've talked about M. King Hubbard and how he just wants to, or how he already has, in a way, created the technocracy that we're seeing. Getting everybody on a grid, so to speak, and how and how things like Jade Helm is that grid. How Anthony Patch has broken that down as well, and how we've looked at that in so many different realms. Basically, how this is the American experiment, the experiment. And that's what we have to look at. Things like HARP, things like virtual reality, things like all of what we would consider this advanced technology. We have to realize that they're now being employed, and with that comes a change in society. We have to realize what's going on in the background. We've realized now that it's not only governments that are corrupt, it's the banks that fund the governments. So now we have to look at, well, who funds the banks? Who gets these things out there? And it's technology. That's where we're at these days. It's technology that's being used to explain what's happening in so many different ways, and that's what we have to look at. Whether or not we want to admit it. Right there, Bill Knight, he asked himself, are we living in a computer simulation? I know people have asked themselves that as well. It's because we're able to look at what's really happening to society, where we've either been dumbed down or we've been able to be, like I said before with Jade Helm, emulated. And they're experimenting on us. But to pull away from the realm of crazy momentarily, because I'm sure I'll go back there in a second, what we have to understand what this really means, is because we're seeing the birth of the New World Order, because we're seeing the implementation of the technocracy, the way the world changes. This is, like I said, 15 years after 9/11, after they conducted that ritual in America on the world. These things are happening internationally. It's because it's global chaos that requires a global solution. And that's how they want to put it. is that we right now, because we can't control our own affairs, we can't control our own affairs without having these people interlude. Need to pay attention to what's going on at the Pentagon, but what I'm trying to say is we're in a time of great turmoil because they want to try to paint themselves as the heroes. Like I said, people like George Soros, how he's saying that this new migration problem, this new refugee crisis will be the new norm. How Pope Francis, how he's called for, New World Order at least like 12 different times. And how he's just messing with people's spirits and their souls and, Catholics all across the world, but that's a whole different discussion. But he's a perfect purveyor, a perfect poster child of Agenda 2030. He's totally for it. And that's what it is. They want to break us down to where we don't even look at, we don't really look at the factors that are being included. It's through all this dervish of craziness, this dervish of migration, this dervish of whatever you want to call it, destruction, destabilization, that they're able to create this new world order, this one that will handle all of these different people. They're trying to break down borders. One of the things I think is kind of interesting, quietly FEMA had activated their civilian corps. And all the while, the White House approved starting to use some of its artificial intelligence. So basically we have a Watson, we have a computer running the White House. And in the back door of everything, they're saying get ready for disasters because they understand what's really happening. They're trying to basically push people in to these bigger inner hub cities. They're trying to push us into these domes, into these, like I said, these cities, these hubs, these areas where they can watch what's going on, where they can spy on a massive population. I mean, you can check a corner. I'm sure you can see an eye in the sky. Amazon themselves, they've patented power light charging drones. The reason they're doing all of this is because they want, like I said, they want to be able to experiment on us. If it's not through behavioral social experiments, psychotronic warfare, even through the ELF towers, Gwyn towers, things like that. Or the psychic conditioning of video games these days. The psychic repetition of run, kill, run, kill, run, kill, or run, kill, die, run, kill, die, run, kill, die. It's through things like this, through police brutality. They're trying to stoke a fire between the common man. They're trying to make us seem as if we're less than. But you know what they say? Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. And this is why we see a lot of the different things that are going on. It's because people are waking up to what's happening, to these injustices around the world. People are decoding the matrix. They are waking up. Right there, genetic engineering, financial engineering, and social engineering are not isolated events. And this is because they're trying to push a certain lifestyle upon us. As I said before, giving us the mindset of slaves, where a computer decides what the haves and the have-nots are. And this is why, we're seeing so many different onslaughts with the police, while we're seeing so many different things break out. As I said before, people are tense. the culture clash, the globalization standard, the evidence of a great change that's occurring in 2016, the year of light, the year where I feel like they're seeing themselves, or they're showing us who they really are. These New World Order Luciferians, I don't know what is. The New World Order will use Facebook and all these other things that are being implemented onto the grid to get out their message, to make everything seem like what is socially acceptable, what can be discussed through things like censorship. They'll put us away forever. They'll completely cut out thoughts. Like I said before, even George Soros uses Facebook to some degree. George Soros, Bill Gates, Pope Francis, all these different people who are proponents of the technocracy. Who was the guy that replaced Steve Jobs? Tim Cook. There you go. Yeah, Tim Cook. I should probably put him up there. I haven't really heard much from him lately, though. I just hate Bill Gates because of his vaccines and like what he's done with Zika. And George Soros, and like I said, how he's funding all of this chaos that we're seeing. But I put faces on these people so we can have real targets, instead of just saying things like Hillary Clinton is a racist, or Hillary Clinton's weak and evil, Donald Trump is a racist. We have bigger issues to look at. Things like mass migration, population control. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the jump on us. It's because we're not coming together using this time frame, as I said before, to build something. They're creating an authoritarian dictatorship where they create the rules, where they tell us what we can and cannot say. This is because we're not exercising the utilities that we have, the greatness that we could achieve. As I said before, this is 15 years later, and look at how fast their plans have come into action. There's no other way to explain it besides get engaged. Decode what it is they're trying to do, because in the next 15 years, the Agenda 2030 will be in play. The next 14 years, appropriately. Earth Overshoot Day, that was August 8th. Okay, and so basically what that is we're living in a Wall-E reality, where there's too much trash. Okay, so to some degree they have legitimate understanding of what's going on, and this is why through things like sustainable development technologies, through renewable energy, through, like I said, environmentalist actions, they will try and have the authoritative power to do these types of things, because that's where we're at. And unless we get engaged into the actual situation and start making our own statements and our own stakes in the matter, we won't know how to deal with it. They will continue to experiment on us. They will continue to have the authoritative state of stance, like I said, to do these types of things. Pope Francis will continue going on saying that Earth is becoming an immense pile of filth, and that global warming is a sin, and that man can atone by carpooling and recycling. So if you want these people to have power over you, basically in their system, is abide by their rules. They're, like I said before, they're trying to basically come out as if they are the saviors, and this is their whole problem. This is their whole dialectic. This is their whole MO. This is how they operate. This is what they do. As I said before, Governor Rick Scott of Florida, he has ties to the Zika mosquito company, financial ties, so that should kind of illustrate to you what's going on. George Soros is funding Black Lives Matters and eventually these climate change activists. You see, so we have all of their cards right now. We have to see what's actually going on to understand what it means in the larger end. I mean, EU, the Brexit, that's evidence of people not wanting to go towards globalism, not having to pay for swaths of migrants. But it's because we're so swept up in so many different things, we can't really see, like I said, behind the curtain of what's going on. We think we can see the truth, but we don't see how some people are being orchestrated and used. Boom, right there. France deploys 3,000 reserves, train school authorities for new school year. And that's because of all the quote-unquote attacks they suffered over summer and prior to summer. I mean, Francois Hollande said, get used to the terror and to the chaos. And that terror, that equals a police state. They had troops on the door, on the floor, going door to door, basically. Like I said, these are subtle steps in towards their technocracy. But it also has to work on the outside as well. They have to basically get us into these hubs of cities, into these areas, into these farms, basically, and control us. So you can believe it's not true, but there's too much evidence to point otherwise. And things like global warming, climate control, man-made climate control, they will use all of that as a pretense to attack us in a global fashion, because the weather affects everyone, and that will be the one world religion. That will be the thing that defines us all. Right there, California Governor Jerry Brown signs a new climate change law. And that's SB 32, where it basically gets carbon emissions down to back to the 1990s era, or the 1990s time frame. And there's a reason why, like I said, I'm bumping around in all these different places, because they're trying to get us into a fear state, a fear-induced mindset, a scientific takeover, to where we have been so induced by fear. Like I said, we can't see behind the curtain what they're doing. Toxic air pollutant particles found in human brains, possible Alzheimer's links, from the Lancaster University. Think about that. Think about what that means. That's crazy. So I hope I gave you guys enough information to kind of go out there and go do your own research. I know I definitely went over a lot, as I usually do. But as I said before at the start of the episode, how has 9/11 affected you? Does the government official story make you question the legitimacy of our American government? 15 years later, here we are, I'm talking about how we're being affected on a global scale. How these monsters like George Soros have come out. How people like Bill Gates have been exposed for modifying Zika. How does it make you feel knowing that all these different types of things are going on in the world? That they're calling for a bullet in Julian Assange's head, in the WikiLeaks guy. an attack against alternative media. Right there, Monsanto's herbicide glyphosate found in vaccines. All this different truth is coming out 15 years later, and we need to start doing something with it. We need to realize the time frame that we're in. Like I said, the mindset they're trying to give us and what we can do. Instead of being a victim, because people are waking up, we need to use this time frame to make something of ourselves. But that's all I have for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have it in the description bar below. And as always, guys, stay vigilant, expose lies, and share truth. This is Noise Era, Freedom Faction, out.